So can the church liturgies and the digital liturgies coexist? Because what I'm thinking of is, as you were talking about the church liturgies, is, well, what about these virtual churches, online services, and so on that are becoming more and more popular?
I think they can coexist. I am less. I don't know that they can cohabitate. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is, I don't know that if you try to put a church online, and there are different extents of this. This is not monolithic. So some places have a live stream that they offer to anyone. Some places have a live stream that they only offer to members who are unable to attend. So there's a spectrum on here. But I do think that the value system of the internet is intrinsically opposed to the value system of the church service. So the church service calls on believers to assemble together, to care for one another, the one another's in scripture, love one another, serve one another, prefer one another. Okay, that right there is impossible to do when you are spectating church through a monitor. Like you actually cannot do that through a screen. It's impossible. It's like trying to hand you a pizza through our podcast connection. I can't do it. It's physically impossible.
Mm.
But then also there is a shape to the web, particularly its values of distraction and consumption, that kind of turn church into a spectator sport. And I think why this is difficult for people to conceive of, partially, is that for many people, church is already a spectator sport, and it was a spectator sport before the live stream ever was invented or got put up due to COVID. And so they just don't feel the reality of that, because they've been going to church simply to download the sermon and the music into their brains, and that's to them the purpose of church. And it
Yeah.
feels like I can do that just as efficiently in my living room at 10 a.m. as I can at the church. So why can't I do that? But I do think the internet reinforces the sense that this is a performance. This is a performance that I'm supposed to consume, just like I would consume a concert or consume a TED Talk. This is a performance that I'm supposed to consume. Hopefully, it'll generate kind of some emotional response in me, and that's the point. I get the emotional response, that's the benefit, and then I'm able to turn it off. That's just not what church is. Church is the preaching of the word, the proclamation of the gospel. Church is the embodied gospel, are Christians who are indwelt by the Spirit coming together, and in that the Spirit of Christ, Spirit of the risen Christ, is active among his people, kind of shaping us all into the image of his Son together. There is an inescapably kind of mutual relationship that we have with each other in the context of the church. And you simply cannot reduce that to something that you can consume. But of course, that's what the internet does. The internet takes all of life and turns it into a consumable commodity. And that's why, you can get people who act like they're your friend on YouTube, and you can kind of have like these simulated chats and relationships with them. That's why AI, artificial intelligence, there are already movies written about people who form emotional bonds with these chatbots, who can
Yeah.
simulate personhood to them. That's what the internet does. And so I'm pretty skeptical that there is any long-term benefit from kind of trying to place the form of the church inside the form of the web. I think one has to break the other.
Mm. That's an excellent answer. And it goes back to what you talked about before and what's in chapter 1, which is the embodiedness of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And that how God designed us embodied in a physical world, and how growth in the virtues that he desires for us are intended to be grown and lived out in that embodied world. And because we downplay that, or we just have completely lost the value for that, we assume that, like you said before, watching church is the same thing as attending church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that, I don't know if you've ever read Doug Groothuis's The Soul in Cyberspace. He wrote it back in the 90s. And he makes a good point related to this, because, he saw a lot of this way back then. And he said, people will think that and claim that, well, I'm having an experience of church, but he's saying you're having an experience of pixels. and audio and data, but it's not the same thing. It's an experience of images and sound, but not the same thing as being there. I think anyone who maybe has this experience it'll help to understand if you've ever had the chance to see one of your favorite speakers at a live event, whether it be a conference or church service, that you've listened to a lot of their sermons online. I've had that privilege getting to see some of my favorite guys like Matt Chandler, John Piper, who I listened to a lot online, but then I got to see in person a couple of times. And the sermon is far more powerful and just different in person than it is online, because there is that embodiedness aspect.
Yeah, and culturally we seem to be kind of coming to a reckoning on this, right? I mean, you have Taylor Swift's tour that is breaking all kinds of records, and 75,000 people are crowding into an arena post-COVID to attend a concert. I think there is an ambient sense in our society that we have kind of let the digital in a little too far. Like we've digitized our lives excessively, and I'm hopeful that this will turn into a recovery of in-person gathering, of kind of physical spaces that we can meet together. I think the challenge for everyone, for Christians, for secular folk, is going to be, how do you articulate the value of in-person, of physical community, in a context where it's just hard and awkward and vulnerable. I think that the screen offers the illusion of protection. I think people retreat behind the screen because it feels like they can be a little bit safe from the things that kind of make us dread being in person. So whether that's how we appear, or kind of not feeling like we're able to kind of socially navigate a particular dynamic, or just fearing that awkward silence. I think that has become a major source of people intentionally kind of digitizing their entire lives to get out of that awkwardness. And I actually think that's connected in a very real sense to the worldview crisis that's going on with regard to gender. So it's become now normal to suggest that I am not my gender, that the anatomy that you would see on me is not who I really am. Yeah. And I think partially that's connected to this sense of the person behind the screen can actually be different than the person on the screen, that I can actually kind of project my mental self adequately onto the internet and exist as a person in this disembodied space. I think that's a plausibility structure that makes things like the gender revolution more likely than not.
Yeah, I agree. I think those absolutely go together. And I think something you said before is also really nails it, which is that people hide behind their screens. I think that one of the main reasons that we become addicted to our phones is because we use it as like a coping mechanism for social anxieties.